What up, reader fam? Welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. You should catch me up in the comments with how you're doing. Tell me about your lives. Anything exciting happened to you lately? Let me know down below in the comments. Today, I'm going to be taking on a challenge that I saw over on Haley and Booklane's channel. I'll leave a link to her video down below in the description. It honestly feels like it's going to be a rather difficult challenge, but I'm up for it. Even if it ends up making me have a mental breakdown in the middle of it, I'm here for it. Today, I'm going to be going through each shelf on my bookshelf, ding, 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 and picking out the best book on that shelf and the worst book. Now, the reason this is going to be rather challenging for me is because generally I love all the books that I have in my collection currently. The ones that I've read at least, because obviously there's quite a few unread ones on here as well. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle for me to find ones that I feel indifferent about. But I'm going to do my best. I'm going to go with the flow. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's go to the first shelf. This shelf is going to be incredibly hard to pick a worst book from because I love everything that Victoria Schwab puts out, but I think the worst book has to go to The Near Witch. The one that has the widest gap in reaching out and shaking hands with perfection on that shelf is The Near Witch. Sorry, Witch, you're not near as close to perfection as the rest. This was Victoria Schwab's first book, and honestly, it was a great debut. Like, I really enjoyed it for the most part. It's really nothing like her other books either, which honestly, I feel like Victoria Schwab kind of churns out different books left and right. Like, she never sticks to one lane. She's kind of like here, and she's there, and she's over there as well. And I think what I liked about reading this one is that I could see how she had leveled up with her other books, because I read this after reading some of her more recent releases. So going back to her debut, I've been able to see how she's grown as a writer, and let me tell you, she has grown. It's got a nice fairy tale vibe to it. It kind of brings in a little bit of a hocus pocus feel, but overall, I just felt like I wanted more from it. I wanted more from this world in terms of like the magic system, kind of wanted to know a little bit more details, give me the deets, and I wanted more from the characters, mostly in terms of their personalities. But overall, just not my favorite Victoria Schwab book, but I still love it. It's great. Now for the best of the best, I'm gonna have to give the trophy to Vicious. Vicious. It's what it deserves. Even though I haven't read Vicious in such a long time, it impacted me so strongly. I love this freaking book, and I still feel like if I were to read it today, it would take the cake and eat that cake. It wouldn't just let it sit there. Nope. It full-on devoured that cake. It's got that anti-hero complicated feelings running up through it, and the characters, ooh, let me tell you, they are messed up, but that's what makes it such an interesting read. The characters are far from boring. They're super hecka complex, and they bring all their flaws to the table and say, here I am, accept me for what I am. They've got flavor. Next shelf. This is another difficult shelf because I love all of these books, like genuinely, but I think the one that I would have to choose, if I had to choose one that was the worst book, if I had to, which I'm forcing myself right now, I would pick The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding. Even though I like this book still, I'm just picking it. I'm picking it. Dang, it was really hard choosing this because I love Alexandra Bracken's books. Like, don't get it twisted. I love her books, and I really enjoyed this one. Like, I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is a solid rating. But comparing it to all the other books on that shelf is like choosing between my favorite fruits. All the other books are my favorite fruit, watermelon, and this one is cantaloupe, my least favorite, but I still enjoy it. I don't really know why I had to explain it that way, but I hope that made sense. Does cantaloupe make anybody else burp like crazy? This is another great Halloween-esque book that kind of has a bit of a hocus pocus feel to it. Maybe less hocus pocus, more like Halloween Town-ish, maybe? I don't know. But it's got that kind of middle grade spooky feel to it, and then it brings on the demons. Like, it's about a kid who gets possessed by a demon who made a deal with his great-great-great-grandfather. It's the worst on this shelf though because it didn't really have that wow factor for me. Like, it was just kind of like a middle ground okay kind of book. I enjoyed it, but it didn't like blow my mind. And overall it was a bit overdrawn for my taste, a bit too much detail in my opinion. Like, I got to a point where I was like, okay, let's get to the point, shall we? As for the best, it's a no-brainer for me. It's going to The Archived. I'm choosing this one for nostalgic reasons, but also because even after all these years of shouting my love for it, I still feel like it's one of Victoria Schwab's most underrated books. Now, I'm not saying that it's her best book ever, I'm just saying I feel like it's super hecka underrated when it comes to her inventory of books. And I will keep serenading you all with my love for this book until the end of time. Except no serenading and more so just book pushing. I'm gonna push it in your face. It's just such a great story with lots of ghosty vibes, great friendship elements. We've got a great grandfather-granddaughter relationship that I really love, and it also kind of explores grief in a really interesting way. Highly recommend The Archived. Next shelf. The best book for sure, hands down on this shelf, is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. The best! Are you guys tired of me talking about this book yet, or am I okay to keep talking about it until the end of time? Because it's probably what I'm going to be doing. It's a top tier book, and it crushed me with all its crushing power, and emotionally, let me tell you, I went through it with this book, but I picked up my feels off the ground and carried on my way through life, even though this book destroyed me and didn't put me back together again. How dare you? But also, what an honor to be destroyed by you. Bless you. It's one of those books where I came out of it so surprised to be so strongly impacted by it. I oftentimes have a hard time with books that are written in verse. The format doesn't always work for me because I feel like it's really hard to kind of go in deep with the characters and go in deep with the plot, but this one did both of those things. It's a really great read that's kind of focused on character exploration, but it doesn't just focus on the character and like kind of ditch the plot. Like the plot is also great as well. It managed to land on the shelf in my head of books that I will never shut up about. As for the worst, I'm sorry to all my classic lovers, to all my 1984 lovers, but it's 1984 for me. Now, I'm really not somebody to poop on classics. Do I read a lot of classics? No, but I'm not over here being like, boo classics, get rid of them, who needs them? Like, I understand their importance, I understand why people like them, but this one for me, like, it had a really solid first chunk, but that second chunk, I was doing the most to make my way through it. I was trudging along. I will say though that I loved all the conversations that this book brought up surrounding society and the manipulation that we face on the daily. Did it make me spiral? Oh yes it did. I was like, ooh, this is a little too real right now. But I just felt like it needed a bit of a cleanup on aisle 2 in terms of the second chunk of the book. It needed a little sweep just to make it that once you hit that course you see nothing but the finish line. Again, I respect it for what it did, but it's just not my favorite overall. This is pretty much my Leigh Bardugo shelf. There are some Holly Black books, but it's pretty much reigned by Leigh Bardugo. This is going to be kind of hard, but I think the best book obviously has to go to Six of Crows. My love. My one true love. Ain't no squad like the Six of Crows squad. I know it makes me so cliche to pick this. I know I talk about this book way too much, but it came into my life and ruined my life in the best way possible. It made me appreciate the Grisha universe a lot more and made me appreciate the way that Leigh Bardugo builds up her worlds. And I think about these characters multiple times a week. They've embedded themselves into my mind to the point where I'll be reading another book, and I'm like, I wonder what Inej is up to. How would Kaz Brecker handle this situation? Yo, if Nina was in this book, she would elevate it. And it makes me feel like I'm cheating on the book that I'm currently reading. And it's the book that I always come back to. Like, even though we've technically ended things, I've read it, we're done, we're through, I always come back to it every now and then for a reread. As for the worst, I'm gonna have to give it to Ruin and Rising. But hold the phone. I feel like it really deserves a reread from me. I need to give it another chance because I remember next to nothing about it. I just remember being capital M-A-D about the pairing that ends up happening in this book. That end game had me mad. And because I was so upset about that, it kind of overshadowed everything else within the book. So I feel like my opinion could change on it after a reread. I've just got to find the time for a reread. Next shelf. I'm pretty sure the best book on this shelf that I've read is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. The first book that started my love for Ruta Sepetys. And also I feel like this is one of the first books where I was like, I really enjoy historical fiction, don't I? Methinks I do. Ruta has such a gift of exploring stories in such a real way. Obviously, they explore real events. Hello, historical fiction. But her writing makes you feel like you are experiencing these events through the eyes of a real character. And honestly, that is some powerful writing skills to be able to deliver that. As for the worst, it's gotta go to The Amateurs by Sarah Shepard. It's a book that I thought was a lot of fun, but I also recognize all the flaws it has. But for me, it was just so easy to get caught up in all the drama, and there were so many moments that had me shookity shook. I feel like I definitely went into it being a little bit judgy too, just knowing the author had also written Pretty Little Liars and being like, I am skeptical. But it surprised me with how much I enjoyed it and how invested I got into the whole situation, and the book really delivered on the mystery aspect. So you're probably wondering why I'm choosing it as the worst book on that shelf. Let me tell you why. I felt like there were some inconsistencies with the plot, and also the characters did not feel their age. They felt like full-blown adults. And while I love reading about some spicy drama, some of the drama in here sent me to the Cringe Festival, a festival I did not want to attend. Next shelf. This one is kind of hard, but I'm gonna go with what my gut is telling me, what's tugging on my gut, which book is tugging on my book gut. Wait, no, which book is tugging on my gut? Anyway, I'm gonna go with Want by Cindy Pon. I have chosen you. You are wanted. I want you. A squad of characters fighting for justice in a futuristic version of Taipei. Vroom vroom, let's go. As for the worst, it's kind of a no-brainer. I'm going with The Fifth Wave. I honestly don't know how I would feel about this book now, because even back when I first read it, I had a hard time getting through it, and I don't fully remember how I felt about it back when I first read it. I just remember being like, ugh, this is so slow. I'm having a hard time getting through it. When are things gonna pick up? It definitely does bring a lot of interesting things to the table, and I do think it does do a lot of interesting and unique things in terms of the dystopian genre. Like, it brought some fresh takes to that table, but I think what it lacked overall for me was engagement. Like I never felt fully invested in it. I needed hands to pop out of the book and hold me close and keep me engaged. Actually, I did not need that at all. That would be so creepy. I ended up DNFing the rest of the trilogy because I tried reading the second book and I just could not get into it. Did I even finish it? I don't think I finished it. I think I was like, nope, not for me. Goodbye. Next shelf. On this shelf, I feel like the best that I've read is going to have to go to Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Sanderson knocking it out of the park again. I feel like this is pretty different compared to Sanderson's other books, but it still maintains that high quality work that goes into the world building, and I highly appreciated that. I also just loved the journey that our main character went on. I'm somebody who always roots for the underdog, like underdogs come through, kill it, slay it, let's go. And I just enjoyed seeing her evolve and thrive and turn over this heavy as heck leaf in her life and keep moving forward. As for the worst, I think I'm gonna go with Your One and Only. I still really enjoyed this one, and I feel like it really did execute the concept overall of clones. Like it was kind of creepy and trippy at times, but I really liked that about it. It also low-key made me think a little bit too much about clones and what it would look like if we lived in a world where clones exist. And let me tell you, I spiraled. I was spiraling off a slippery slope. But I think there were aspects in the plots that could have been explored more. In fact, I think that's my main problem with this book is the overall plot. Like I felt like it just needed a little bit more. It needed a punch, and it never got to that punch point. Also, there were a few scenes that were just a little weird. I mean, the overall concept of clones is weird as it is, but there were just some scenes that were questionable. Next shelf. There's so many good ones on here, but I feel like the one that really impacted me, like shook me up, is A List of Cages. I don't know if this is the best book or the book that destroyed me the most. Are you guys seeing a trend here with the books that I love? Like they've all destroyed me. Like what does that say about me? Why do I love books that destroy me? Tell me why that is. I remember going into this one and being like, oh, this cover is so bright and happy. I can't wait to read about a wholesome friendship in this book. And like, yeah, there is a wholesome friendship, but it is dark. Dark. And when I read it, I felt like I had just walked my way through a storm of heartache. It was wildly heart-wrenching and painful at times, but it has such an immensely strong impact that no matter what, you'll never forget the book and the way that it made you feel. Clearly, I'm a testament of that. It's also just a great reminder that we're all going through things behind closed doors, and to be nice to everybody. Kindness is key, people. But I'm not here to preach today. As for the worst, oh, the worst, I'm gonna go with Phantom Limbs. This was a well-paced story, and I really loved the concept, but overall I had quite a few issues with this one. And overall, I feel like one of the side characters would have been so much more interesting to follow than our main character. And also, Phantom Limbs, the title comes from the side character. The reason I'm calling it the worst, though, is because like, whoa, I'm falling over. Why do I stand on one leg when I film sometimes? And I'm just like, why am I falling over? It's because you're standing on one leg, Jesse. Anyway, okay. The reason I'm calling this the worst, though, is because I could not stand how possessive the main character got over a girl that he had some history with. This girl who he once had like a romantic cycle with in his life went away for a while and then came back into his life. And she's in a relationship, but in his mind, he's like, I own her. She's mine. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works, yo. That's toxic. I feel like there are two contenders for the best on this shelf, and that's Geekerella and The Astonishing Color of After. They're actually right next to each other, which is kind of funny. I think I'm gonna go with The Astonishing Color of After, though. I'm sorry, Geekerella. I'm sorry. This is such a polar opposite book to Geekerella. Like, that book is like happy-go-lucky. This one is devastating, sad, but I feel like I always lean towards books that have a really big impact on me when choosing my favorites, and this one definitely had a big effect on me. Like, it just came into my life and stained me with all its glorious colors. Me saying that makes more sense if you've read this book. It's just such an incredibly moving story, and sure, it had me grabbing for the tissues as I was sobbing. Did I actually cry while reading this book? I don't remember, but it definitely made me emotional, and I vibed out with it, had some sad boy hours. As for the worst, it's a no-brainer. It's Fairest for me. Y'all probably knew that was coming because y'all know I despise this book. I despise Lavana in general. And this book I felt like was trying to make me feel bad for her, and like I did feel bad for her, but she's still a terrible person. She's still horrific. She's still doing terrible acts. So yeah, in a lot of ways I do feel bad for Lavana, but I don't think it excuses her terribleness. And yet I've kept it because it needs to complete my Lunar Chronicles collection. Next shelf. I feel like the best. I gotta go with my cliche answer here and just say The Hunger Games. Iconic. I mean, come on, I can't not pick The Hunger Games. I still think that this is a book that kind of holds up over time. Like, you know how when you read a book and you're like, oh, this book was amazing, it did that, and then you read it a few years later and you're like, what was I thinking when calling this my favorite book? That is not a situation I've had with The Hunger Games. Like, when I've reread this book, I still love it. What can I say? It's iconic.
And as for the worst, I gotta go with this boy right here, Mr. Standoff.
This is the sequel to Winger. This book right here, which I also have a lot of issues with, but this one has just as many issues as Winger, if not more, and I felt like one of the things that I really didn't like is just how our main character treated another character. I will say that we did see growth with our main character and how he felt and acted towards a certain person, but I still didn't like it. I still felt really weird about it, and I kind of also felt like this was a sequel that didn't need to happen. Like, this one just kind of felt like it was grasping for plot lines to pull in to keep it going, and I could have done without it. Will I read another book if he writes another book in this trilogy? Probably, because I'm trash and I'm curious. I want to know what happens next, even if it ends up not being my favorite. Does anybody else have a series like that where you're like, I know this is a mess, and yet I can't stop reading it? Let me know down below in the comments. Next shelf?
Okay, for this shelf, the best book on here, oh god, ooh. I feel like it's going to have to be Don't Read the Comments by Eric Smith.
I love it. It's so great. It's got a video game aspect that I really love. It's got a really interesting friendship that develops into more of a romantic relationship, and it talks about online harassment, which I really loved that aspect of it because I feel like that is a topic that we need to be talking about more. And this book just shapes out the characters so well. All the side characters bring so much to the story. Nobody is one-sided. Everybody is just shaped out so well, and I just loved seeing it. It was so great. I need another book by Eric Smith ASAP.
As for the worst, I'm not really seeing one that I like hate or despise, but I think my least favorite on this shelf has to go to As You Wish.
To be fair, I don't really have a worst on that shelf. I just felt like this one is like my least favorite on that one. But my critique for this book is that it could have been condensed a bit, could have shed a few pages, but I still really enjoyed the story and felt like it was pretty unique. Like, the concept itself might not be the most unique, but it took a concept that's already been done and made it really interesting. And also, something else that I really liked about it is just kind of the overall storytelling format. It reminded me of books like The Sun Is Also a Star and They Both Die at the End, where we see perspectives from other people within the world. And I really liked that. I felt like it added a bit more depth to the story. Next shelf.
This one's kind of funny because the books are right next to each other and they're by the same author. What could it be? What could it be? It's these two books right here. Which one do you think is the best book and which one do you think is the worst book? The best book is The Book Thief.
This book slayed me. It stole my heart and didn't give it back. And my heart now rests in this book. That would be creepy. Not to say that it's a perfect book because it could use some work in the pacing department. And also, did it need to be that long? Questionable. But overall, I still have a solid love for it.
And then obviously the worst book is Bridge of Clay.
Finally, the last shelf. I feel like I'm losing my voice.
This shelf, I feel like my least favorite is this one right over here, this book right here. It's called Hearst.
This book was kind of cursed. Maybe if I just stay here quietly, they'll forget that I just said that. I mostly just found the plot of this one to be rather lackluster. Like, things happened, but they weren't really engaging. It didn't really like hold my attention the whole way through. Like, the things that do happen are uninteresting. It also didn't help that I was hecka confused a majority of the way through this book. So like, oop, is that me being small-brained? Probably. But that's just obviously not a very ideal situation to be in when reading a book. Like, you want to be in the know, and I was in the unknown. Cue Into the Unknown. Into the Unknown. And done.
And my favorite on this shelf is between Shadow of the Fox and Truth Witch. I think actually I'm gonna go with Truth Witch. This book right here.
This book, though, criminally underrated. I think I've read it 2 or 3 times now, and each time I reread it, I enjoy it even more. It's got such a rich and detailed world. There's so much to kind of uncover in reading this book, and the characters are so layered. And I was here for all of it, and I wanted more. Alright, that's it for this video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. This super hecka long-winded video. I had a lot of fun doing it. Again, I got this idea from Haley, so I will leave a link to her original video down below in the description. Go and check it out. Let me know down below in the comments what you guys are currently reading, because I feel like we haven't caught up on our reading lives lately, so fill me in. What are you currently reading? But that's it for this video. If you liked it, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, yo!